And now the final stretch, it is, of course, the month of August. It is Women's Month. And when we talk about a cybercrime and investigating cybercrime, what comes to mind? You're probably thinking about some whiz kid sitting somewhere hacking away behind a computer. And most probably you're thinking he is male. Well, my next guest is challenging all of these stereotypes in a male-dominated world where she is making her mark in this particular industry. And speaking to us now via Skype is Fatima Ameer-Mia, who is a director in technology, media and telecommunications practice at commercial law firm that is Cliffe Dekker Hofmeyr. Thanks so much for speaking to us this morning, Fatima.
Hi, good morning.
So, Fatima, first and foremost, how did you get into this field? Because it is rather male-dominated. So, what drew you to it?
Well, I studied law at the University of Cape Town, and then I did my articles at a big law firm in Joburg, and I practiced in the media, technology and telecoms team. And I've always had an interest and a passion in the way that technology is implemented in businesses. And I saw the gap in the market. There were not many specialists at the time, and that's really what propelled me to study and specialize in this area.
So tell me, are women taken seriously as hackers? Because, some would say, well, you need to get into the mind of that hacker in order to try and solve whatever cybercrime you may be after. Are you taken seriously, do you believe?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I think the beauty of the internet is that it's both anonymous because anyone can be a hacker. So essentially, as long as you have an internet connection, whether you are a 60-year-old man or a 16-year-old teenager sitting in Africa, you're able to be a cyber criminal, essentially. What is important from a legal perspective is that we've got the Cybercrime bill, which criminalizes and describes what an offense is. And the important elements of the offense are the elements of intention and the elements of unlawful. So it's not about the identity of the perpetrator as long as you can prove those two elements.
So what would you say, Fatima, is the extent of cybercrime that we deal with in South Africa?
Well, recent statistics have actually shown that South Africa is rated as the #1 hub for cybercrime. That's according to a 2018 Risk Alliance Barometer report. And I know that in Africa, South Africa is the third country which is the hardest hit by cybercrime. So it's definitely something which is it's a crisis that's facing us at the moment, and you'll notice that we've had quite a few data breaches over the last few years, and we don't really have the legislation in place to regulate this.
So you did just give us a brief overview there of the law and what it says, but what are the legalities in as far as solving cybercrime in South Africa and not infringing on privacy laws of the individual?
Okay, so in South Africa, I would say that our law enforcement agencies are generally quite poorly equipped to deal with cybercrime. The law relating to cybercrime is actually a hybrid between legislation and the common law. Currently, cybercrime offences are regulated under the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act, but I think that the government has realised that we haven't really kept up with international standards and with technology, and so they have promulgated, on the one hand, firstly, the Protection of Personal Information Act, which was in 2013, and then recently last year, in November, the National Assembly passed the Cybercrime bill. And what's important about the bill is that it consolidates and codifies numerous offences relating to cybercrime. It also creates new offences. It sets out the jurisdiction of the courts, which has been extended. It relates to the search and seizure powers of the police. So once that bill comes into force, we'll be sort of more on par in relation. From a privacy perspective, so the right to privacy is enshrined in Section 14 of the Constitution, and in order to give effect to this right, the government enacted the Protection of Personal Information Act. Now, the Act was promulgated in 2013, but has not yet been signed into law by the President, so it's not yet in operation. And what's important about the POPI Act is that it establishes the information regulator, and it also establishes a cybersecurity framework. So from that perspective, responsible parties or operators are obligated under the Act to secure the confidentiality and integrity of information in their control by taking reasonable and appropriate technical and organizational safeguards.
So just as a parting shot, Fatima, what sort of advice could you give to South Africans to protect themselves from falling prey to cybercrime?
So I think definitely to take a proactive approach to cybercrime and to data protection. As an individual, it's important to understand when you are on the internet and you are providing personal information, make sure that you understand who you're providing your information to. Are you consenting to provide your information? Who will that information be shared with? Make sure that when you consent, you actually read the privacy statement or privacy policies, and then just be careful. I mean, there is so much going on with data fraud, identity theft. The internet is, just because you're sitting, in the safety of your home behind a computer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need to be vigilant. Be careful with your credit card information. There's so much fraud happening. So I would just say it's a word of caution, and just be proactive with the way that you manage your personal information.
Thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing that with us. Fatima Ameer-Mia, who is a director in technology, media and telecommunications practice at commercial law firm Cliffe Dekker Hofmeyr. And she's, of course, a woman making her mark fighting cybercrime, which is notoriously male-dominated, that particular industry. Well, that's all we could squeeze in for this morning.